What do you get if you take the Goonies and the Universal monsters and mash them together? You get the Monster Squad. 100 years ago, legendary monster hunter Abraham Van Helsing failed to banish Dracula and his minions to limbo. Fast forward to present day small town America, where a group of monster loving kids came across Van Helsing's diary and learned that Dracula is back, searching for a powerful amulet that could plunge the world into eternal darkness. The Monster Squad quickly realised that the monsters from their favourite movies, Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, the Gill Man and Frankenstein's monster, are real and are threatening their town. This movie was directed by Fred Dekker and written by Shane Black, who saw this movie as a tribute to the Universal monsters by having them return in the 1980s to take over the world. But Universal turned down the opportunity to make this movie, so redesigns had to be made to the characters to avoid legal issues. But there is no mistaking that these guys are the Universal monsters, even if legally they are not. First we have Dracula, played by Duncan Rieger, who is in my opinion one of the best Draculas in the history of vampire movies, and is actually considered to be one of the best Draculas ever by the fans. And in my opinion, he is definitely underrated. I can't say this enough, he is a great Dracula. And his costume is amazing. It looks a lot like Bela Lugosi's and Christopher Lee's combined, and it's got this beautiful red colour on the inside of the cape, which really pops on camera. And this Count Dracula has style. He also drives a jet black hearse, which looks a lot like Ecto-1 but black. I like to call it the Dracula mobile. He kind of feels like a pulp comic book version of Dracula, and I love this interpretation. He's cold, calculated, and actually pretty scary in certain parts. And I actually think a lot of the cast members in this movie found him scary as well. There's one particular scene where he picks up the youngest member of the Monster Squad, Phoebe, and he shows her his bloodshot eyes and he opens his mouth and shows her his fangs. And the scream that comes out of that little girl was actually real. She screamed in real life. He actually scared her, and the actor felt bad about this afterwards. And he also has all the usual powers in this movie, like changing into a bat. In fact, one of my favourite scenes in this movie is where he is shot whilst he is a bat, and then we see him injured in this disturbing half-man, half-bat form, which looks so scary and creepy, and the monster movie makeup on this is amazing. And it reminded me of some of the costumes used in the 1992 release of Dracula starring Gary Oldman, and also reminded me a little bit of the transformation scene in American Werewolf in London. And you may be interested to know that Liam Neeson very nearly played the part of Dracula, but as we know, it never happened. But even though I think he would have been a pretty good Dracula, I honestly think that the actor they picked was just perfect for this role. He is such a good Dracula. I can't say that enough. And then we have the Wolfman, who is truly the tortured soul in this movie. He goes through some stuff, believe you me, such as being blown up with dynamite, and he still comes back to life. He's resurrected. And then of course, he gets kicked in the nards.
Do it! Wolfman's got nards!
This Wolfman looks quite terrifying. Granted, it's not the best werewolf mask of all time, but it's also not the worst. Unlike the Universal Wolfman, this Wolfman has a protruding mouth and wolf ears on top of his head, and eyes that are spread slightly apart. And Stan Winston was responsible for the designs of this movie, and it said that when he was designing the Wolfman, he was looking in a mirror. So the Wolfman kind of has a look of Stan Winston in some ways. And I love the transformation scenes in this movie. Sometimes they're pretty simple, where you're just staring at the guy's boot or the hand, but there's also a scene in a phone booth where he spits out some bile. There's a few cuts and you see the makeup change between each cut, and then the werewolf smashes out of the phone booth, and it is quite unnerving to watch. It's very, very cool, and the transformations look painful, and I think in any werewolf film the transformations should always look painful. And then we have the Mummy, who is the classic bandaged up version. The actor was actually very thin and slender, which made his portrayal of the Mummy that extra bit convincing. The Mummy is quite slow, but he is persistent, and he will get you eventually, and likes to hang out in kids' closets for some reason. And one of the best scenes is where he literally comes undone. Frankenstein's monster was played as a friendly giant who befriends Phoebe, the youngest member of the Monster Squad. His portrayal is very much like his Universal counterpart, a little bit more chilled out maybe, and he is painted a more flashy colour, rather than the green colour that Universal used on their posters for their movies. And they also moved the bolts on his neck to his head. And then we have the creature from the Black Lagoon, who is called Gill Man in this movie, and I think he had one of the more impressive costumes. It was gross, it was wet, and truly looked like a walking fish man. And man, this guy was brutal. In one scene, he straight up crushes a guy's head between his hands. Pretty violent for a kids movie, wouldn't you say? That is a monster lineup, but I want to give a special shout out to all of Dracula's brides who were very, very creepy and scary in this movie. I'm not sure why, but Dracula's brides in any vampire movie always give me the creeps, and I find them very unnerving, and in this movie it's no exception. They are really, really well acted out. And then we have the Goonies, the Monster Squad. First we have Sean Crenshaw, the leader of the group. He is brave, he is smart, and he is obsessed with monster lore. Then we have Patrick, Sean's best friend, who is loyal and supportive. And then we have Horace, who is Chunk from the Goonies, more or less. The bully kid, who is pushed around by the bullies and called Fat Kid. And he's even called Fat Kid by his friends for some strange reason. And this guy probably has some of the best scenes in the whole movie, including Wolfman Has Nards, and of course the scene where he cocks the shotgun at the end of the movie and shows the bullies that he's not going to be pushed around anymore.
My name is Horace.
And then we have Rudy, the cool older kid, leather jacket, sunglasses, a mean aim with a crossbow. Looks like he's straight out of the 1950s rather than 1980s for some reason. And then we have Eugene, who tragically has his Twinkie stolen from the Gill Man in one scene.
Lot, Pete. Creature stole my Twinkie.
Bastard. And then of course we have the glue of the group, Phoebe, Sean's little sister, who of course befriends Frankenstein and is actually responsible for winning the day at the end of the movie. Now I've got to say that the look and the feel of this movie is such a treat. Like I said, it definitely has Goonie vibes, but also Gremlins vibes in some ways, I feel. And the set pieces are amazing, especially at the start of the movie when Van Helsing storms Dracula's castle. It really did capture that universal monster feel and possibly a little Hammer horror as well. It really did look like Dracula's castle from the 1931 movie starring Bela Lugosi, but of course different in some ways and in full colour. But as beautiful as this scene was, it is also one of the scenes I had a little problem with. Now in this scene we see the bride of Dracula, and we also see a few skeletons rise up from the ground and fight Van Helsing and his men, but we don't actually have a confrontation between Van Helsing and Dracula, which I thought was very strange. Also, where are the other monsters in this scene? Shouldn't they be here as well? That would explain why Dracula is looking for them in the modern day, but they are nowhere to be seen at the beginning of the movie, which I think was a mistake. Now apparently there is a version of this movie which was shown on television with an extra whole 4 minutes that padded out the plot a little more. There's actually a cutscene where Dracula is seen staked at the beginning of the movie. He's dead, he's defeated, but the guy guarding Dracula's body is approached by a bride of Dracula, and he reaches inside and grabs the stake out of Dracula to, finish off the bride, and Dracula is resurrected from the dead. I think this should have been left in the movie. It would have made it feel a little bit more padded out. But saying all that, despite my issues with this scene, it is still a very, very cool scene at the beginning. I only wish that we got a little bit more of it. The Monster Squad was kind of aimed at kids, but it did have a few profanities and violence and gore, which as a kid, I won't lie, I loved. The movie had an age certificate of PG-13 in the US and a 15 in the UK, but is strangely portrayed as a family movie. But most parents probably did not want their children watching vampire brides munching down on the guts of an opossum, or getting shot with stakes, werewolves getting blown into gross bloody chunks, or hear the kids in the movie talking appropriately about their teacher and friend's sister.
I mean, when they send you to school, won't they tell you about the homos and the people with cat heads? Sister doesn't speak German. All she does is hang around and the guys touch her tits.
Not to mention that Count Dracula calls Phoebe, the youngest member of the Monster Squad, a bitch.
Give me the amulet, you bitch!
There's also a scene where we see Rudy, the cool kid, kill some vampire brides and take out Wolfman with a silver bullet. And I feel that this may have been a little bit too much for a kid's film. Although I did appreciate that he looked shook up afterwards, so the movie showed us that he wasn't happy about having to kill them, but he did anyway. And then of course we have Horace, who blasts a bloody chunk out of Gilman's chest, killing him instantly. And the leader of the Monster Squad, Sean, sticks Dracula himself. He drives a wooden stake into his heart, and it is quite violent, and the violence probably went against the movie. That and poor marketing. Now, here's a personal story about this movie. I had actually forgotten how gory this movie was and violent, and I played it for my kids when they were much younger than what they are now, and I had to turn it off halfway through. I think it was where Wolfman exploded into bloody chunks where my little girl decided it was time to check out. It was just too much for her. It was violent, but I feel it was a comic violence and gore, leaving it in the strange middle ground of being too violent for kids and maybe not violent enough for adults, even though as a kid I loved it, and as an adult I still love it. And I'm not the only one, there are so many Monster Squad fans out there who absolutely adore this movie. The Monster Squad was considered a flop on release, but it did rise from the grave, so to speak, when it was released on home video and television. The Monster Squad has a loyal fan following, and in my opinion and many others is one of the best monster movies Universal never released.